I spent most of my life wrapped up in sacrifices for my son, Jack. He was my world, my reason to push forward through every tough day. Now, at 58, sitting alone in a small, dimly lit apartment that seemed to shrink just the same as my patience did over the years, I wonder how everything came to this point. The peeling wallpaper and the faded couch mirrored the tiredness I felt deep inside. There was a constant hum from the traffic outside and the faint smell of dampness in the air, like the apartment itself was holding on to years of silent sorrow. I often found myself lost in these scents and sounds, as if they were some kind of anchor to a past that would not let go. For decades, I sacrificed parts of myself for Jack. First, I quit my job as a secretary, the one steady job I had managed to hold on to through my 20s and 30s, because he needed me more. Jack struggled in school, and I made sure I was always there, tutoring, driving, listening. The second sacrifice was my social life. Friends' birthdays, movie nights, or just simple coffee dates became rare events. I pushed them aside, thinking Jack's needs came first, so no one really noticed when I stopped returning calls or invitations. My third sacrifice was even more personal. I let go of any dreams of romantic love or companionship. After my divorce, I convinced myself that my son was enough, that he was my family, and would be my sole focus and joy, no matter how lonely that choice made me. I swallowed my loneliness like bitter medicine every day. I convinced myself that this was normal, that mothers give so much and don't ask for anything, that it was my fate. I rarely thought about my own needs. Emotional closeness, validation, affection, all were ignored, buried beneath the belief that being strong for Jack was the only way to survive. Even when I felt empty, I kept telling myself that my sacrifice was noble, a duty to the boy who depended on me for everything. Financially, life was tight. Without steady work, I survived on small government benefits and bits of odd jobs that barely made the rent at the end of the month. Bills piled up slowly, and my savings, what little I ever had, evaporated long ago. I couldn't rely on Jack for support, not that I wanted to, but the reality of our dependency weighed heavily on me, like a worn-out coat too heavy to shed. To the outside world, people saw me as the devoted mother, the one who always put her child first, even if it meant hardship. Some admired my endurance, others pitied me. But inside, I felt like a faded shadow of the woman I'd once been, diminished and small. I no longer recognized myself, trapped in a role I had accepted so completely that I forgot who I might be without it. Two memories surfaced uninvited as I sat there, quietly sipping the cold tea I'd forgotten to finish. The first was from years ago, sitting by Jack's hospital bed when he was a teenager. He had fractured his arm during a soccer game. I stayed overnight in that cold hospital chair, clutching his hand, promising him it would be okay. I was exhausted but felt needed and alive at that moment. The second memory was far darker. A recent birthday party I tried to organize for him, inviting a few acquaintances, only for Jack to leave early, uninterested and distant. I stood there feeling invisible among the laughter and chatter, a guest who nobody really wanted. Those moments revealed cracks in the sturdy image I had built around my purpose. My home was a reflection of my solitude, the walls adorned with faded family photos, a mixture of bright smiles from past birthdays and vacations now tinged with melancholy. The couch sagged in places where I often sat alone thinking about the future, or rather, the lack of one I saw for myself beyond Jack. The kitchen was small and cluttered, a place where quick meals replaced any sense of comfort. Everything spoke of a life devoured by waiting and watching, by putting another's needs before my own. Though my body carried the weight of years, my soul felt heavier. I knew I had been living for others, but I had no idea what it meant to live for myself. That thought, once so foreign, started to whisper in the quiet corners of my mind. But for now, I remained tethered to my routines, to the sacrifices I had made, hoping that somewhere deep down, Jack understood everything I had given up for him. The event was set in a sleek, modern piano showroom downtown, its polished marble floors gleaming under bright spotlights, mingled with the faint, rich scent of polished wood and leather. Voices from well-dressed customers mingled with the subtle, melodious notes, echoing from a grand piano in the corner. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation, laughter, and the clinking of glasses, a scene painted with glamour and affluence. I was there to browse options for a grand piano, a small luxury to bring beauty back into my life. As I settled onto the bench, about to test out the ivory keys, the front doors burst open. A flurry of footsteps echoed sharply, cutting through the soft music and chatter. In came Susan, flanked by her usual circle of socialites, their squeals and sass filling the room. I barely had time to register the shift when she immediately spotted me, her eyes narrowing with pure disdain. "What kind of store is this?" Susan scoffed, making sure everyone heard. "Margaret, what are you doing here?" Her voice dripped with scorn, sharp enough to slice through the polished ambience. She stepped forward, blocking my path, a smirk twisting her lips. "A housekeeper? You think you can afford this place? Don't tell me you're just here for the free coffee. I've seen plenty like you, pretending to be buyers just looking to snag some snacks," she sneered. Around us, whispers sprouted. Eyes glanced our way, laced with judgment, curiosity, and thinly veiled hostility. Despite the uncomfortable stares, I stood my ground, holding my head high. A young assistant beside me attempted to diffuse the tension. "Chloe, I'm not busy right now. I can show this lady around." But Chloe, Susan's cousin and eternal thorn, shoved her aside, eyes blazing with contempt. "And who do you think you are? Lecturing me on how to do my job?" Chloe snapped, her voice loud enough to reach the growing crowd, which now gathered like sharks circling their prey. 2 burly security guards appeared as if summoned by the tension, stepping to escort me out. My hand rose calmly to halt them. "I am here to view a property. On what grounds are you kicking me out? Where's the manager? I want to speak with someone in charge," I demanded, my voice steady despite the flush of cold fury rising in my chest. The showroom fell silent, but for the dull murmur of challenged whispers. Chloe folded her arms and scoffed. "Go ahead, make a scene. Let's see how far you take this little performance." Then a young man in a crisp white shirt approached, exuding polished professionalism with a courteous smile. "Good afternoon, ma'am. I'm Alex, the sales manager for this project. Is there an issue I can assist with?" Before I could speak, Chloe interrupted with venom. "She's just here for freebies. I was about to have security remove her." Alex's expression flickered with hesitation but remained civil. "Ma'am, would you mind showing us financial verification? This is an invitation-only showcase." Without flinching, I pulled out a folder of documents, those same ones they had already verified at the entrance. Chloe snatched it dramatically from my hand. $5 million? Are you kidding me? A housekeeper? There's no way you can afford this place. This has to be fake," she hissed loudly, drawing gasps from the crowd. Smiling calmly, unfazed by her shrill accusations, I opened my banking app on my phone and held it up with deliberate ease. $8 million gleamed on the screen. The room's energy shifted instantly. The stares of judgment turned wide-eyed, mixed in awe and disbelief. Someone whispered, "Damn, she's got serious money." Chloe's face drained of color with shock and fury. The crowd's mood flipped, their assumptions overturned on their head. I could hear faint gasps, a ripple of whispers, and the cool rearranging of attention toward me. No longer invisible, the power once hidden beneath years of sacrifice now glowed quietly, clearly, an unspoken challenge in the polished showroom lights. Yet beneath their surprise, there was a yawning chasm of cold indifference. Susan's circle smirked and exchanged dismissive glances. She stepped toward me, her voice dropping to a cutting whisper, just loud enough for me to hear. "You think this changes anything? You can't buy respect. You'll always be the woman we throw aside." Her words landed like stones in my stomach, the sting sharp and merciless. My hands trembled slightly, heat rising in my cheeks, my heart hammering against my ribs like a frantic bird. But outwardly, I remained calm, grounded in a new resolve that would not be broken by their petty cruelty. Inside my head, a steady stream of unspoken thoughts wrestled with the cold reality. How had I let this go on for so long? How had I normalized this insult, this invisibility, this public humiliation by those I once loved? My breathing tightened, the room seemed to spin. The polished floors felt like quicksand beneath me. A young woman, almost unnoticed by the crowd, caught my eye. She gave a small nod, a sign of solidarity amid the smirks and jeers, a flicker of hope maybe. But that was brief as the tension thickened again. Then came the final straw. Susan's sneering dismissal shouted across the room as she turned dramatically. "Don't think this is just about money, Margaret. It's about pride, and you'll never have that." The words echoed, hanging like a dark cloud over the festive air. In that moment, I sank inwardly, isolated amid all the glittery laughter and applause around me, a figure both visible and unseen, forgotten and denounced, maimed by the cruelty etched in words and glances. My body reacted with a shiver that ran from my neck down my spine, a bitter mix of nausea and shock twisting my gut. My hands clenched into fists at my sides, nails biting into my palms. The room's bright lights felt blinding, the joyous chatter of others now a hollow, distant echo. Quiet tears traced down my cheeks, hidden quickly as I straightened my shoulders. No one came to my aid. No comforting word, no hand on my back. The party continued, laughter punctuating the room's air, but I was cut off, a shadow cast across an otherwise bright scene. I caught myself thinking, they never saw me, not really, and the bitter truth sank deeper. I was nothing more than a placeholder, a footnote in their stories, discarded the moment I stopped bending. As I turned and walked away, the sharp click of my heels on the marble felt like a defiant drumbeat, echoing the new fire burning within, a seed of refusal planted in the fertile soil of humiliation and neglect. The contrast was stark, glitter and glittering eyes behind me, silence and rain in my heart ahead. I left the showroom that day, not as the woman who had once sacrificed all, but as someone who now felt the searing clarity of her overlooked worth, ready to face what came next alone, but awake. The night weighed heavily on me as I walked away from the restaurant, the last echoes of laughter and music fading behind. The cold air bit into my skin, but inside, a hotter storm was brewing, the storm of realization. For years I had lived in a pattern of silent sacrifice, giving pieces of myself away until there was almost nothing left. Tonight the harsh light of truth had exposed what I had tried to ignore. My life was a cycle of exploitation and invisibility. I felt my breath catch, sharp and uneven, as the full weight of this truth settled on my chest. The trembling in my hands was more than physical. It was the tremor of a soul waking up. The warmth of anger and sorrow swirled inside me, cutting through the fog of years spent shrinking to fit the needs of others. I recognized finally that my self-neglect was not noble. It was damaging. 3 moments came vividly back to me. The first, a quiet afternoon when my son came home from school, excited with drawings and stories, and I was too exhausted from juggling 2 jobs to smile properly. I asked him to be patient with me, though he couldn't understand why I was always so tired. The second, a whispered argument with my husband years ago, when I told him about my own dreams and desires. He dismissed them with a tired sigh and turned the conversation back to his needs. The third, a birthday past, when I watched friends' photos on social media, longing for connection, but never receiving invitations. At the time, I accepted these moments as sacrifices required by love and loyalty. Now, I saw them as cracks in the foundation of my life, warnings I ignored. My body reacted physically, heart pounding, palms sweating, as I understood the pattern I had lived, giving until empty, hoping for appreciation, yet receiving neglect. The voices in my head echoed, a chaotic loop. Why did I let this go on? Who am I beyond their shadows? What do I deserve? The apartment was still and dimly lit by the streetlights outside. The faded curtains hung heavy like the years of silence I carried. I closed my eyes and traced the edges of the old ring on my finger. It was loose now, a dull metal reminder of promises made to others but broken inside myself. That ring was a symbol of who I had become, stretched thin and fading. Suddenly, my thoughts broke through the fog. I realized that the pain and exhaustion were not my fate. I was not forever bound to this role of invisible caretaker, endlessly giving and never taking. The truth was sharp and fierce. I was worth more. I deserved to live a life not defined by sacrifice, but by choice. A clear, intense clarity settled over me, different from any fatigue or sadness I had known. It felt like a burning light inside, illuminating the path ahead. I was seeing my life with new eyes, eyes that refused to accept invisibility, that demanded recognition and respect. My internal dialogue grew louder, stronger, louder still. I am not invisible. I am not just a shadow. My dreams, my needs, they matter. The moment was electric. I felt a surge of decision, impulsive yet powerful, sweeping out the quiet despair like a wave. I thought of the worn photo book on my shelf, pages filled with images of a younger me, smiling freely, fearless. That woman was still within me, waiting to be found again. I stepped inside my small living room, the place that had often felt like a cage. The familiar worn armchair called out, and I sank into it with a breath that was part surrender, part resolve. On the coffee table, the bottle of aspirin was a quiet witness to years of silent suffering. This time, I didn't reach for it to dull pain. I let the pain be a signal, a call to action. Past memories flickered, my mother telling me to be strong for the family, my husband's quiet impatience hiding on me like a cloud, the friends who drifted away when I couldn't always say yes. Those tokens of self-denial now felt like chains for me to break, not badges of honor. The night outside whispered possibilities. I could feel the city breathing beneath my window, alive, moving, free. I touched the keys to my old laptop, the symbol of a life I paused years ago. Could I reconnect with that part of myself? The thought sparked a fragile hope. Fear and courage wrestled inside me, but beneath it all, a flicker of determination grew. It was time, no, past time, for me to reclaim my story, to stand up within my own life instead of fading behind others' demands. I whispered into the quiet room. I'll find myself again. I don't have to disappear anymore. The night stretched before me, uncertain but full of possibilities. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just surviving. I was ready to live. The dawn crept softly through the thin curtains, painting the room in pale gold hues that seemed almost hesitant to touch the worn furniture. For years, this space had been a silent witness to her sacrifices, a place where her presence faded into the background, much like her own voice. But today was different. The air felt heavier, yet charged with a quiet promise. She rose from the bed with deliberate care, careful not to awaken the familiar ache in her joints that had become a constant companion over the years. There was a tight knot in her stomach, a mixture of anxiety and determination twisting inside her chest. No longer could she afford to live veiled in shadows. This morning marked her first conscious step, breaking free from the invisible chains. The bedroom mirror offered a reflection she barely recognized, a woman I'd overlooked, worn thin by decades of silent service. Her eyes, tired but fiercely bright now, held a new fire. The soft lines around her mouth told stories of endless restraint and quiet endurance. But today, they seemed to hint at emerging strength. Her hand hovered near the dresser, where countless reminders of past roles, a family photo with faces turned away from her, a collection of faded notes and lists written in her careful script, rested in quiet indifference. But the small jewelry box caught her attention. Inside lay a simple but meaningful silver necklace she hadn't worn since her younger, more hopeful years. Without hesitation, she fastened it around her neck. The cold touch settled against her skin like a subtle rebellion. The kitchen smelled faintly of overnight chill and the distant scent of rain that still clung to the view beyond the window. She brewed coffee, the aroma rich and grounding, while her mind churned with meticulous plans. Today, instead of suppressing her needs, she would act on them. The enormity of what lay ahead did not dawn as a roar, but as a steady, unyielding whisper. Her destination, the community center, a place she had passed by countless times but never dared enter. It was modest, walls lined with peeling paint, fluorescent lights that hummed incessantly, and a faint scent of worn paper mingling with cleaning products. To others it was just a building. To her it symbolized a tangible step toward reclaiming herself. She arrived early, the echo of her footsteps filling the empty halls. Rather than the familiar posture of resignation, she stood tall, every movement measured and deliberate. There were no dramatic speeches, no desperate pleas, only quiet resolution. She spoke calmly to the receptionist, registering for a volunteer position arranging support materials for women in similar situations. Her voice, soft but clear, carried no echoes of past submission. The first days were tentative, shadows of doubt flickering in her mind. Old habits whispered that she was invisible, that her efforts were unnoticed and unimportant. But small victories emerged. An appreciative glance from a volunteer, the successful completion of a task she'd long neglected to consider worthy of her energy. Each little success settled on her shoulders like shards of light, and the weight she carried seemed lighter, uneven, but uplifting. Back home, the contrast between the heavy quiet she had known and the new spaces she now occupied grew starker. The house, once suffocating in its clutter and trapped memories, began to feel like a place where she could breathe again. She rearranged a small corner to accommodate her journal and a few books, a modest sanctuary for thoughts once buried. Evenings brought doubts, like restless shadows edging close. The pull of old roles and expectations tugged at her resolve, but she breathed deeply into the tight spaces of old fear, grounding herself with the steady rhythm of her heartbeat and the cool touch of the necklace resting against her skin. The firm line between what was and what could be became clearer. One afternoon, as she sorted through old correspondence stored in a neglected box, an unexpected surge of emotion welled up. Letters she had hidden away, notes from family members filled with unspoken demands and disguised reproaches, were suddenly stripped of their power. Instead of shame, she felt clarity. The years of relentless sacrifice, the constant placing of others' needs above her own, had been met with indifference or expectation rather than gratitude. This realization did not shatter her. It galvanized her. She made a list, brief, pragmatic, of boundaries to set. No more instant availability at every beck and call. No more agreements made out of a sense of obligation or fear of conflict. She planned simple, firm statements she would use when pressed. It was a blueprint for change, small yet profound. Physical changes accompanied the shifting tides within. Her shoulders, long stooped under imagined burdens, relaxed incrementally. Eye contact, once fleeting and hesitant, became grounded and steady. Her voice, still soft but imbued with a new assertiveness, carried in conversations where, before, she had only nodded. Her first tangible break from her prior pattern came unexpectedly. A call from her son, its timing inconvenient, the tone demanding, arrived while she was mid-task at the center, before she would have dropped everything to comply. Today she calmly told him she would call back later, firmly but kindly. The silence on the other end was the loudest response she'd heard in years, but she remained unwavering. The small victory rippled through her, a proof of her rebuilt boundaries. Later, she found herself standing by the window, watching the faint glow of streetlights mingle with the early evening haze. The necklace caught the light, a shimmer that was no longer just adornment but an emblem of her reawakening. A subtle smile touched her lips. This first conscious act of defiance against a lifetime of erasure was not explosive, not dramatic, but it carried the weight of a mountain moved. The path ahead was uncertain, but she had crossed the threshold. The quiet calm of resolve filled the space where doubt had long resided. In that stillness, a promise whispered, this was only the beginning. The moment the doorbell rang again, it felt like a challenge thrown right at my feet. After months of silence, of me holding my ground, when Colin and Vanessa came demanding what they thought was theirs, they weren't finished yet. My hands were steady as I walked to the door, but my heart thudded loud enough to shake the walls of the small house I now called my own. I opened the door slowly, and there they were, Vanessa with her sharp eyes and Colin's restless stance, like predators, cornered but dangerous. Their expressions were a mixture of anger and disbelief, as if they couldn't comprehend that I was no longer the woman who would bow to every demand. "What do you think you're doing?" Colin said, voice harsh and trembling with frustration. "This isn't yours. You can't just kick us out like that." My voice was calm, quieter than theirs but heavy with a new kind of strength. "I'm not kicking you out," I said slowly, locking my gaze with his. "I'm reclaiming what's mine. This house, this life. I earned it, not you." Vanessa scoffed and stepped forward. "You think you're better than us now, after everything we did for you? Don't forget who put a roof over your head when you had nowhere else to go." I swallowed the bitter taste of old wounds rising to the surface. What you call help felt like a cage. Every favor was a chain, and now those chains are broken. Suddenly, Colin's anger burst like a flood. He shoved the door hard, trying to force his way in. The door rattled but held firm against his push. My arms were steady as a rock's base. "You're selfish," Vanessa spat, voice rising to a scream. "After all these years, you just throw us away. What about loyalty? What about family?" I took a slow breath, feeling the flood of old emotions threatening to drown the hard-earned calm. But this time, I was ready. "Family," I repeated softly. "The day you told me family comes first was the same day I realized I was invisible to you, a ghost who served your needs, but never had a voice." Vanessa's eyes blinked rapidly, unable to shrink away from the truth she knew, but never spoke. Colin's fists clenched. "You're mad, Mom. You're confused." "I'm clear as daylight," I replied with quiet fire. "I'm free." The doorbell rang again. Leonard stood on the porch, face calm and steady like an anchor in the storm. Vanessa shot him a glare, but he simply nodded toward me and said, "She made her choice." Colin glared but stepped back reluctantly. Vanessa twisted her lips in disdain and muttered, "You'll regret this." I shut the door firmly and turned the lock, the metal's click echoing like a verdict. The house breathed differently now, lighter somehow, as if the walls themselves knew I was no longer a prisoner. Later that evening, my phone buzzed with messages that came like daggers. "How could you do this to your own blood? You're selfish and ungrateful. We should have never taken you in." I read and deleted them one by one, a painful ritual of cutting toxic cords. Then another wave of calls, Colin's voice desperate, pleading for understanding. I didn't answer. The next day, Vanessa showed up unexpectedly. I wasn't surprised. She rang the bell and started knocking fiercely, but I didn't respond. She left a note wedged under the door, accusing me of destroying the family and being heartless. That evening, the phone rang again. It was Leonard, always steady, his voice soft. "Are you holding up?" I sighed, feeling the isolation wrap around me like a heavy blanket. "I'm scared," I admitted, voice barely a whisper. "We're not alone," he reminded me. "You've got me." A few days passed and the pressure mounted. More calls, more messages, attempts at guilt and manipulation. "We did this for you. You owe us. Your father would be ashamed." I remembered the nights I spent wiping Colin's tears after his mistakes, the arguments I stifled to keep peace, the dreams I buried silent, and I said to myself, enough. I set firm boundaries. No more answering calls from them. No more opening doors to demands. I changed my phone number, blocked messages, and arranged for new locks. One afternoon, a letter arrived from Colin's lawyer, demanding I reverse the unfair actions and give them keys to the house. I drafted a response with Leonard's help, firm and clear. "This house belongs to me by law and by right. Any attempts to force entry will be considered trespassing." The legal battle was only just starting, but inside me, a new fire bloomed, a fire of self-respect and unyielding will. The hardest moment came one bleak afternoon when an old friend, Margot, someone I'd trusted for years and had helped mediate family conflicts in the past, questioned my actions. Her voice was quiet but firm. "Are you sure you're doing the right thing? Maybe you're just pushing them away because of anger." I looked her in the eye, my voice steady. "I'm finally pushing away from a life that drained me. I'm choosing me, Margot, for once." The isolation was sharp and cold, friends slipping away, family turning enemy. But for the first time, I felt a distinct pulse of freedom in the silence. Late at night, when doubt crept in like shadows under the door, I'd close my eyes and remember the first time I dared stand tall in that living room. The way my breath steadied and my body no longer trembled with fear. I was no longer the servant of grief and sacrifice. I was becoming the architect of my own future. Every call unanswered, every door closed, every boundary drawn was a stitch in the fabric of my new self, a self worth fighting for. And with Leonard's quiet strength beside me, I knew this battle wasn't just for a house. It was for life, reclaiming its rightful place. Part 6. Discovery of Hidden Truth. I stayed in the silence of the afternoon, the slow dance of shadows shifting across the cracked wooden floor as I approached the dusty box I'd hidden away for years. It was tucked behind old blankets, forgotten photographs, and knickknacks that once felt like treasure, but now only echoed the weight of time. My hands, trembling ever so slightly, traced the outline of its worn edges. That box had become a symbol of my past, locked away, untouched, but never truly gone. The impulse to open it surged stronger than any hesitation. I needed answers, even if they tore me apart. Once the lid creaked open, a faint musty odor filled the air, wrapping around me like the memories I had long suppressed. Inside were faded letters, brittle photographs, and an assortment of papers, all weighed down by years of neglect. My fingers hovered over the contents, hesitant but eager. Then I spotted something, a slender envelope, yellowed by time, carefully tucked beneath the others. It bore my name, written in a familiar hand, but with a formality I had never seen before. I pulled it out, unfolded the thin paper inside, and began to read. The words stabbed at my heart with the precision of a surgeon. Confessions of deception, betrayals hidden beneath layers of love and obligation. This letter, penned some 2 decades ago, revealed truths about my family that no one had dared to speak aloud. There were names I barely recognized, actions I couldn't have imagined, all tied to decisions that impacted me and my sacrifices. It spoke of lies told to protect, but at what cost? The very foundation of everything I had dedicated myself to seemed to crumble beneath my gaze. As I read, my body reacted in ways I hadn't anticipated. My breath hitched, a sharp sting behind my eyes, and a cold rush coursed through my veins. But amid the heartbreak, something strange emerged, a clarity I had been starving for. The illusion of sacrifice as selflessness and love began to unravel, replaced by a deep understanding that I had been manipulated, held hostage by the promises and pretenses of those closest to me. This was more than just pain. It was revelation. I wrapped the letter in my hands and stared at the peeling wallpaper around me. The faded flower patterns seemed to mock my own faded hopes. It was then I realized that box, those letters, were not just relics. They were keys. Keys to unlocking the truth, to freeing myself from decades of servitude, silence, and invisibility. The floodgates opened, and memories came rushing forth. I saw clearer now the afternoon I stood outside a closed door, overhearing hushed voices slicing through the quiet of the house. Back then, I had dismissed the tension as fleeting stress, but now, with this new lens, I recognized the deceit hidden in every whispered word. I remembered a birthday years ago when smiles masked cold avoidance, when a secret letter slipped into a carefully wrapped present that no one wanted me to find. Those moments had been breadcrumbs, signs of a fracture I failed to acknowledge until now. Tears came unbidden, hot rounds tracing paths down my cheeks. But these tears were not born of hopelessness. They were balm, a cleansing release for years of buried grief and fury. I allowed myself to lean into the storm without resisting, giving space to the messy, tangled emotions roaring inside me. As the afternoon sun waned, the room felt both oppressively small and expansively open, much like my heart. I sat back and held the letter close, wondering how I could have spent so long blinded by duty and love twisted with lies. What had I missed in the relentless cycle of sacrifice? The letter did not chain me. Instead, it unshackled something vital. It transformed my doubt into resolve, my heartache into purpose. For the first time in ages, I saw the flicker of possibility, a chance to reclaim my story on my terms. Slowly, I began to plan. The path ahead was uncertain, muddy with pain and fear, but illuminated now by the power of truth. I could no longer live as a shadow, erased and exploited. The discovery whispered to me, promising liberation, demanding courage. I carefully folded the letter, tying it with the fragile blue ribbon that had kept it safe for so long. The fragile binding felt like a thread connecting my fractured past to an emerging future. Rising from the chair, I placed the box back in its corner, but my spirit lifted. The air felt fresher, somehow lighter. An invisible weight had lifted. Outside, the fading light painted the sky in hues of pink and orange, a silent promise that endings often harbored beginnings. I stood at the window watching the world move on, and inside me, a quiet but unyielding flame began to burn. This secret, though painful, became my anchor. No longer a prisoner of half-truths and silent suffering, I would walk forward armed with knowledge, and with myself fully in sight. The real journey was just beginning. I stood outside the door, heart pounding loud enough to drown out the distant city sounds. The air was thick with humidity, the faint scent of rain lingering, wrapping around me like a damp blanket. My hands were clammy, fingers twitching as I clenched and unclenched them, trying to steady the storm inside. Just beyond this threshold was the person who had shaped my world, with chains disguised as love. Someone I was about to confront, not with anger, but with the quiet force of truth. Taking a breath, I pushed the door open. The room, dimly lit by a low lamp, smelled of stale tobacco and old leather. The clock ticked monotonously on the wall, each second amplifying the tension. His eyes lifted slowly from the book he'd been pretending to read, surprise flickering briefly before settling into something cold and calculated. "Look who finally shows up," he said, voice dripping with disdain. I didn't flinch. The years I'd spent shrinking into shadows were behind me. "I'm here to speak my truth," I said, voice steady despite the knot in my throat. He scoffed, brushing a hand through his graying hair. "Spare me the theatrics. You owe me everything." His tone was sharp, like a blade meant to cut me down. "No," I replied, stepping forward. "I owe myself everything, not you, not the past." The words tasted bitter but empowering. He narrowed his eyes, rising slowly, filling the cramped space with his looming presence. "You think you can just walk away? After everything I did for you?" I shook my head, the light from the lamp catching the fire igniting in my chest. "You didn't see me. You used me. But I see myself now." He laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "You're delusional." I'm awake. The simplicity of my response hung between us, a crack in the facade that no longer held. He took a step closer, voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You'll regret this. You're nothing without me." For a heartbeat, doubt flickered like a shadow, cold and insistent. But then the walls I'd built around my worth rose stronger than ever, and I stood firm. "I am everything without you." The room fell silent except for the steady ticking of the clock and the quiet, steady beat of my heart, reclaiming its rhythm. He looked at me, really looked, as if my words unsettled something deep within him. "Why?" His voice was a croak, vulnerability teetering beneath the anger. "Because I finally know my own value." I took another step forward, breaking the space he thought was his domain. "And I refuse to live in the shadow you placed me in." His shoulders slumped for the first time, the fight draining from his posture. "You think you're better off alone? Better off free," I corrected gently. "Free to breathe, to be, to live without fear." The tension in the room was thick, yet I felt lighter, unburdened by the chains of a past I could no longer carry. He searched my face, perhaps looking for remnants of the person I once was. But she was gone, replaced by someone who refused to disappear again. "I'm done," I said, voice calm but resolute. "Not because I hate you, because I love myself enough to walk away." He looked away, unable to meet my gaze. The silence stretched, a vast chasm where years of pain and sacrifice had lived. Then I turned, feeling the weight of history lift with each step I took toward the door. Before I left, I cast one final glance back. "Goodbye," I said softly. It wasn't rancor, but a benediction for both of us. Stepping into the cool night air, the scent of rain now inviting instead of oppressive, I inhaled deeply. Every breath was a rebellion, an act of reclamation. The streetlights flickered as if in salute, and the world felt suddenly vast and full of possibility. The chains may have been heavy, but I was heavier still, with courage, with truth, with the fierce beating core of a person reborn. And I would never look back. The night air was cool as I stepped outside, the world quiet except for the distant hum of city life. I didn't look back once at the house where the confrontation had taken place, where years of pain and silence finally broke. That night marked my turning point. No more chains, no more shadows. I felt a strange lightness, as if a heavy coat I'd worn through decades had finally been lifted. The street lamps cast long, soft pools of light on the pavement. My steps were steady as I walked, each one measured and calm, unlike the storm of emotions inside that still raged, but now felt focused and purposeful. When I returned to my small apartment, the space seemed different, more mine than ever before. Years of neglect had left it dim and quiet, but now I noticed the possibilities hidden in its corners. I moved through the rooms, running my fingers over the worn wooden table, the cracked windowsill, the faded curtains. These objects, simple and unpretentious, had borne silent witness to my suffering. Now they felt like allies in my beginning. I opened a box tucked away beneath the bed, pulling out a small collection of seeds, purchased long ago. buried beneath layers of old papers and forgotten dreams. Tonight, they would be planted. Kneeling beside a modest pot, I let cool earth sift through my fingers. The scent, rich and damp, rooted me in the present moment. I pressed the seeds into the soil carefully, as if coaxing hope to bloom from quiet strength. Sunflowers mostly, tokens of warmth and resilience. Planting them was my ritual, my vow to myself. Growth would come not despite pain, but alongside it. Outside, the night breathed gently. Crickets sang their soft chorus, and the rustle of leaves filled the silence with whispered encouragement. The very air seemed charged with the promise of renewal. Days later, I met with Sarah, a woman from the neighborhood who had always been friendly but distant. Our friendship blossomed differently now, genuine, uncomplicated. Over cups of fragrant tea, she listened with no hurry or judgment as I shared my story, my truth. Her presence was balm, a reminder that connection didn't always demand sacrifice. "This is your time," she said softly, her eyes steady and kind. "You deserve this peace." Her words settled deep within me. For years I had put others first, children, spouse, family, sacrificing my needs, my desires, my voice. But now the story was shifting. I was learning to set boundaries, to honor my worth, to reclaim the space that was rightfully mine. Colors around me seemed sharper, sounds clearer. The sweet taste of honey in my tea lingered on my tongue, a reminder that life's small pleasures were mine too. The breeze brushing the open window carried the faint scent of blossoms. New life, new beginnings. I reflected on the past, not to be trapped by it, but to understand how far I'd come. The tears, the silences, the long shadows, they were part of my story, but they no longer held dominion over my future. I was no longer tethered to pain or neediness. I was free. The sunflowers in the pot began to sprout, delicate green shoots pushing toward the light. Like them, I was growing upward, gaining strength and clarity. No longer bending beneath the weight of others' expectations, I faced the sun. Each morning I lit a candle by the window, its flame a steadfast glow in the dimness, a symbol of my own light. This small act grounded me, a daily reminder of the power I held to shape my life. The apartment felt warmer now, a true home, imbued with my presence and hope. I had created a sanctuary where I was seen and valued, where love was mutual and life was vibrant. I am no longer invisible. I am here. I am enough. And this is just the beginning.